A man that pretended to be mad to find true love. People whispered whenever he walked past. His name was Richard Miles. Tall, once handsome, now buried under tangled hair, worn-out clothes, and a long stick he used to tap the ground as he limped from one street corner to another. Children threw stones at him. Adults laughed, thinking he was just another madman wandering the streets of Dalton Town. But Richard wasn't mad. Not even close. 2 months earlier, he was the CEO of a thriving tech firm in London, a billionaire by wealth, but alone in heart. He had been betrayed before, once by a fiancée who loved his bank account more than his soul, and again by a woman who said all the right things, only to run away with his business partner. Each time he thought it was love, it turned out to be lies painted in smiles, so he did something no one expected. He disappeared. He handed his company to his trusted lawyer, took out a small amount of cash, shaved his beard rugged, changed his clothes to old garments, boarded a bus, and ended up in Dalton Town, a quiet place where no one knew his name or face. He wanted to find one thing: true love. The kind of love that looked beyond appearances, the kind of love that would see a man's heart before his clothes. And so, for weeks, Richard played his role. He spoke to himself on the street, slept by the corner of a shut-down bakery, accepted leftovers from kind strangers. He made sure to stay near the town market and the church gate, 2 places where people's hearts were tested daily. It was on a Thursday morning, cloudy and grey, that he first saw her. She was helping an old woman carry 2 heavy bags across the road. She didn't look wealthy. She wore a simple dress, hair tied in a scarf, and a quiet sadness in her eyes that caught his attention. Her name was Lily. She worked in a bakery and cared for her sick mother in a small rented room behind the church. She didn't notice Richard at first. Not really, just offered him a soft loaf of bread and walked on. He stared at the bread in his hands, shocked. Others had given him food before, but always with disgust or pity. She gave it with peace, with gentleness, no judgment in her eyes. He began to watch her from a distance. Each day she passed by the same street. Sometimes she sang to herself, sometimes she looked tired, but she always helped someone, an old man, a crying child, even stray animals. One day she stopped again. "You're always here," she said quietly. "Do you have anywhere to go?" Richard mumbled something incoherent, staying in character. She sighed. "I don't know what your story is," she whispered, placing a small container of rice beside him. "But I hope you find peace." He watched her walk away, a strange warmth blooming in his chest. Something about her reminded him of who he used to be, before wealth, before pain. For the first time in weeks, he smiled. Not because he found comfort, but because he had found hope, and maybe, just maybe, she was the one. The next morning, Richard sat by the bakery gate, his stick resting beside him, his eyes waiting. Dalton was slowly waking. The market women were already arranging their goods: grapes, yams, and roasted groundnuts. A group of boys ran past him, laughing and mocking, calling him madman, throwing crumbs at his feet. He didn't flinch. He was used to it. But then she came. Lily. With her scarf tied neatly and her apron already dusted with flour, she walked like someone who carried the weight of the world, yet still found space to smile. When she saw Richard, she paused. "You didn't eat the rice?" she said softly. He glanced at the container. It was still there from yesterday, untouched. He hadn't wanted to spoil it. Somehow it felt special. Lily sighed. "If you don't eat, you'll fall sick." She reached into her bag and brought out a small brown paper. "Here, fresh bread. I just made it. Still warm." He hesitated, then took it with both hands and gave her a slight nod. Their eyes met for a brief second. "I'm Lily," she said. Richard blinked. She waited. He pointed at himself, tapping his chest slowly, then muttered, "Rich." She smiled. "Rich?" He nodded again. "Well, Rich, if you ever get tired of sitting on this hard floor, I usually leave the back of the bakery open when I mop the kitchen. You can sit inside. No one will chase you." With that, she stood and walked in. That evening, Richard wandered to the back of the bakery. True to her word, the door was slightly open. He stood at the entrance, not daring to go in. But then Lily saw him through the kitchen window and waved him in. The smell of fresh pastries filled the air. "You can sit," she said, pointing to a bench near the mop and water bucket. "I won't tell anyone." He sat slowly, overwhelmed. For the first time in weeks he was in a room, not on the streets, not under a shed, but inside a real room. She brought him warm tea in a plastic cup. "No sugar, sorry," she said. "I'm saving every penny for Mum's medicine." He nodded and sipped. Lily didn't ask him questions. She didn't stare. She just worked, humming as she kneaded dough. Richard looked around. Everything was small but neat. The calendar on the wall was marked with circles, probably hospital days. A photo of an old woman in bed rested by the corner. That night, as he walked back to his corner by the bakery gate, he found a single rose lying on his mat. No note, just the flower. He picked it up, confused. It wasn't from Lily. She hadn't seen him since the bakery closed. Was it from someone else? Or was it her quiet way of saying, "You're not invisible"? He held the rose close to his chest, lay on the ground and stared up at the stars. For the first time in a long while, the street didn't feel like punishment. It felt like a test, and someone was finally starting to pass it. The bakery's back room became Richard's silent refuge. Each morning, Lily would unlock the door and mop the floor, and Richard would slip in like a ghost, sitting quietly on the bench with his hands folded. He never spoke much, never gave anything away, but he watched how she worked, how she smiled, how she sometimes wiped her eyes when she thought no one was looking. It had been almost 2 weeks since she first gave him that piece of bread. One evening, while the sun dipped behind the hills, Richard sat outside the bakery, his head resting against the wall, eyes half closed. He wasn't sleeping, he was thinking. About Lily, about the lies he lived, about how long he could keep pretending. A soft voice broke his thoughts. "Why do you sit here every day?" He opened his eyes. It wasn't Lily. It was a man in his late 30s, dressed in neat clothes and carrying a paper bag. His eyes were sharp, curious. "You're not mad," the man said. Richard said nothing. "I'm Daniel," the man continued. "Lily's friend. She helped me years ago when I was broke. She's too kind sometimes, too trusting, so I watch her from time to time." Richard stayed silent, his face calm but unreadable. "I don't know who you are," Daniel said. "But I see the way you look at her." Still no response. Daniel stepped closer. "If you're lying about who you are, don't hurt her. That girl has suffered enough." With that, he walked away, leaving Richard with a burning feeling in his chest. That night, Richard tossed on the mat by the alley, unable to sleep. Daniel's words echoed in his mind. Don't hurt her. He never intended to. That was the point of it all. Find someone who would love him without money, without name, and she was doing exactly that. But how long could he go on like this? The next day, Lily brought him a small first aid kit. "I noticed the bruise on your leg," she said, sitting beside him on the bakery bench. "You were limping worse yesterday." She cleaned his wound gently. Richard winced, but didn't pull away. "You remind me of my father," she said suddenly. "He lost his job. People called him useless, but he never stopped being kind." Richard looked at her. Her voice was soft. No anger, no bitterness, just memories. "He died 2 years ago. Mum's been sick since then. But I try. I do what I can." He wanted to tell her who he was. He wanted to say, "I'm not who you think I am." But something stopped him. Fear, maybe. or the thought that the truth would change everything. When she left, he stared at the bandage on his leg. Lily was caring for a man the world had thrown away, and she was doing it without expecting anything in return. That evening, Richard walked to the old park at the edge of town. He stood beneath the dusty lamppost and made a decision. He would keep the secret just a little longer, but he would protect Lily, even if it meant remaining the madman, for now. Rain fell gently that morning. Dalton was quiet, too quiet for a Thursday. The market women were late to open. The church bell rang later than usual. Richard sat under a metal shelter beside the bakery, watching the droplets hit the ground like tapping fingers. He wrapped his thin blanket tighter around his body. Then he saw her, Lily. But something was different. Her shoulders were slouched, her steps slower. And when she unlocked the bakery door, she didn't greet him like she always did. No smile, no bread, just silence. Richard's heart sank. He waited outside for an hour, unsure if he should knock. Finally, he stood and stepped softly into the back room. She was seated on the floor, her face buried in her hands. Flour dusted her apron. Her scarf was crooked. She was crying. It shook him. He had seen her tired, seen her quiet, but never broken. Richard bent down gently and touched her shoulder. She flinched, then looked up. Her eyes were red, her cheeks stained with tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to ignore you." He shook his head, motioning that it was okay. "My mum collapsed last night," she said, voice shaking. "The doctor says she needs surgery. I don't have the money. I tried. I've sold everything I can. I've borrowed from everyone I know." She looked at him, tears streaming again. "And you're just sitting here. You don't even know me. But I feel like I can talk to you. Isn't that strange?" He didn't speak. He just reached into his bag and brought out the only thing he had kept hidden, a clean white handkerchief. It was the only thing that hadn't been touched by his disguise. He handed it to her. She took it slowly, pressed it to her face, and nodded. "I'll be fine," she said after a while. "I always find a way." But even as she spoke, her hands trembled. Later that day, she returned to her bakery duties, putting on a brave face for the few customers who came by. Richard stayed close, watching over her like a shadow. By evening, Lily looked more composed. She gave him a piece of pie and a bottle of water. "Thank you for sitting with me," she said. "I needed that." He gave her a small smile and stood to leave. But something tugged at him. As he walked back to his corner by the alley, he didn't lie down immediately. Instead, he reached into the inner lining of his shirt and pulled out a small card. It was his emergency bank card, hidden all this while, in case of danger. He hadn't touched it since arriving in Dalton. He stared at it. If he used it, she would know. She would know he was more than a street madman. She would know he was rich. But what if her mother died? He closed his eyes and sighed. He had a choice: stay hidden, or save the woman who had shown him love when the world gave him hate. That night, Richard didn't sleep. At dawn, Richard rose from the cold ground. The street was still dark. The wind had a bite to it, and even the stray dogs hadn't stirred. But his mind was awake, busy, troubled. He held the bank card in his palm like it was a burning coal. He had decided he would help her, but not as Richard Miles, the billionaire. Not yet. Not until he was sure. Not until he had tested the heart behind her kindness. So he waited. He waited until Lily left for the hospital. She had told him the previous day where it was, St. Mary's Hospital, just 3 streets away. When she was gone, Richard stood up, dusted his trousers, and changed into the only clean shirt he owned, something slightly less ragged than his usual disguise. Then, like a shadow, he slipped out of the alley, down the road, and into a corner shop. With an old landline phone, he handed the shopkeeper a few naira. I need to make a private call, he said, dropping the madman act for a moment. The shopkeeper blinked, surprised to hear his clear, deep voice, but he said nothing. Richard dialed a number from memory. Mr. Lewis, he said when the voice picked up. It's Richard. I need you to make a hospital payment, quietly, no names. Just the bill for one patient, Lily Adams' mother. She's at St. Mary's. Handle it now and keep it quiet. He hung up before the man could respond. Then he walked out, put the ragged cap back on his head, and returned to his corner before anyone could notice. Lily came back in the afternoon. Her eyes were swollen but bright. She's going to be okay, she said, breathless. They said someone already cleared the bill, paid everything in cash. I don't know who, no name, no trace, but I've been crying all day. Happy tears. She sat beside him. Do you believe in angels, Rich? She asked, still smiling. He nodded slowly. Then maybe, she whispered. You're one of them too. Richard looked at her, his throat tight. He had never been called anything close to an angel. She rested her head briefly on his shoulder, then stood and went into the bakery. He remained seated, unsure of what to feel. Joy, pain, fear. He had helped. Her, yes. But what came next? Would she still treat him the same when she found out the truth? That night Daniel came again. You did something, didn't you? He said, staring hard at Richard. Richard looked away. I know you're not who. You pretend to be, Daniel added. But I'll stay quiet. Just one thing. Don't break her heart. That girl doesn't have many pieces left. Richard nodded, silently promising something he couldn't yet name. As the town lights faded into night, he looked up at the stars. Again. This time, his heart was fuller. He was still pretending. But maybe love was real after all, and Lily was proving it, one act of kindness at a time. The next few days passed quietly, but something had changed. Lily smiled more. She hummed, louder in the bakery. Even when business was slow, she had peace in her eyes. Her mother's surgery had been successful, and the doctor said recovery would be slow but steady. Still, Lily never stopped looking for the person who paid the bill. Maybe it was a church donation, she told Richard one day. Or one of Mum's old friends, but no one is saying anything. The nurses said it came through a man, but they didn't get his name. Richard said nothing. He just watched her with soft eyes and nodded when she looked at him. By now, most of the townspeople had stopped mocking Richard. They still whispered, still stared, but something about him made them hesitate. Maybe it was the way Lily treated him, or how he now sat straighter, spoke less, and carried himself with quiet strength. One morning Lily handed him an envelope. I want you to have this, she said. He frowned and opened it slowly. Inside was a $10 note, carefully folded. It's small, she said, but you've been here every day, and I know you don't eat much. Maybe you can buy soap or something better than bread. Richard stared at the money. It was the first time anyone had given him anything in a long time, not out of pity, not with shame, but with care. He pushed the envelope back gently, shaking his head. No, he muttered. You need it. Lily smiled sadly. We all need something, Rich, but if I have a little and someone has nothing, then maybe that little is enough. She walked away before he could respond. He sat there staring at the envelope. He had millions locked away in bank. Accounts, shares, property. He could buy the entire bakery if he wanted, but that $10 note, it made his chest ache. That night he didn't go back to the alley. Instead, he walked to the hospital and asked about Lily's mother. The nurse on duty was kind. She's sleeping now. Lily left an hour ago. He stood by the window and watched. The old woman through the glass. Her chest rose and fell gently, an oxygen mask over her face. She looked peaceful. That's when he made another decision. He would fix their lives. Not just the hospital bill, but everything. He would do it in secret until the time was right. The next day he called Mr. Lewis again and gave instructions. Buy the bakery lease. Put it under Lily Adams's name, quietly, and find out who owns the room where she lives. Pay the rent for 2 years in advance. Don't tell her anything yet." Then he went back to his bench, and Lily came around the corner with a plate of beans and bread. "Did you sleep okay?" she asked. He nodded. "I had a dream," she said, suddenly, "that someone gave me the key to a new house. Isn't that funny?" Richard smiled faintly. Maybe the dream wasn't so far off. Maybe soon everything would change, but would she still look at him the same when the truth came? That fear, deep inside him, remained. The week began with unexpected silence. The bakery, usually filled with Lily's soft humming, felt different, tense. Richard noticed it the moment he stepped into the back. Lily was there, yes, but she wasn't smiling. Her eyes were puffy. Her hands moved slowly as she rolled dough. Flour covered her apron, but she looked far away in thought. He sat quietly waiting. After a while she spoke. "Rich, someone's been asking questions about you." His heart skipped. She didn't look at him directly. "2 women came in this morning. They were buying bread, but then they pointed at you from the front window and whispered. One of them said, 'She saw you in a suit once, in a newspaper.'" Richard's hands tightened on his stick. "I told them they were wrong," Lily continued. "But are they wrong?" He didn't answer. She turned to face him. "Who are you, really?" For the first time in weeks, Richard broke eye contact. He stared at the floor. "I'm no one," he whispered. Her face fell. Not in anger, in disappointment. "You don't have to tell me everything," she said gently. "But I need to know if I'm being lied to, that's all." Then she turned away and continued kneading. The silence between them grew louder than any shout. Later that evening, after the bakery closed, Richard sat by the alley, deep in thought. His disguise was starting to crumble. The people from his past were catching up, and Lily, the one person he wanted to protect, was now uncertain of him. Daniel came by again. He didn't say anything at first, just leaned against the wall. "I heard about the bakery lease," Daniel finally said. "She got a letter today from a lawyer, confirmed everything. She owns it now." Richard didn't flinch. "You think you're helping," Daniel said, folding his arms. "And maybe you are. But love isn't a debt you pay. If you keep hiding, it will all fall apart." Richard spoke slowly. "I'm not ready for her to know." "Then be ready to lose her," Daniel said, turning to leave. That night, Lily didn't come to the alley with food. She didn't stop by. She didn't look for him. Richard waited for hours, alone. Rain began to fall again. The same soft drizzle from weeks ago. Only this time, it didn't bring comfort. It brought fear. Was he losing her? Had he broken the only fragile bond he had tried so hard to protect? In the distance, he saw a small figure, Lily, walking home in the dark with an umbrella. He followed her quietly. Not too close, just enough to see that she reached safely. Her steps were slow, heavy. She paused once, turned slightly as if sensing someone behind her, then shook her head and kept walking. Richard didn't sleep that night. He sat on the cold ground, soaked in rain, thinking about everything, her pain, her trust, and the danger of the lie he was still living. Love had knocked on his door, but he hadn't opened it fully, and now it might walk away. Morning came, but the bakery door didn't open. Richard waited in his usual corner, watching the sun rise slowly over Dalton town. His eyes stayed fixed on the bakery gate. No sound, no movement, no Lily. His stomach tightened with worry. By noon, he stood and walked around the back. Still nothing. The door was locked, the windows shut. He tapped lightly, once, then twice. No answer. He circled the corner and walked to the small hospital where Lily's mother had been recovering. When he arrived, he saw her sitting by the flower bed, hands folded in her lap, eyes red. She didn't notice him until he stood just a few feet away. She looked up. There was no smile. "Hi," she said simply. He nodded. Lily stood and brushed the seat of her skirt. "She's okay," she said, referring to her mother, "but I'm not." He opened his mouth to speak, but she raised her hand. "No more pretending, Rich, or whoever you are." He swallowed. "You don't speak like a madman. You don't walk like one. And now I own a bakery and my rent is paid. You think I'm stupid?" He shook his head quickly. "No." "Then why?" Her voice cracked. "Why lie? I trusted you." He looked at her for a long time. Then he sat on the low wall beside the flower bed, his voice low and clear for the first time in her presence. "My name is Richard Miles," he said. "I'm not mad. I never was. I'm a businessman. I came here to find something money couldn't buy, something I had lost. Love that wasn't based on wealth or appearance." Lily stood still, barely breathing. "I was betrayed. Twice. Women I thought loved me were only chasing my status. So I disappeared. I wanted someone to see me when I had nothing. You did." She sat down slowly, eyes never leaving his face. "And all this time," she whispered, "you were testing me." He nodded slowly. "At first, yes. But then I stopped pretending. Being around you became real, watching you care for people, even me, without judgment. It changed me." Tears filled her eyes. "You made me think I had a friend. And now I don't even know what we had." Richard leaned forward, his voice shaking now. "You had my heart. From the moment you gave me bread without looking down on me, I didn't plan for it. I just fell." She was quiet for a long while. Then she stood. "I don't hate you, Richard, but I don't trust you either. Not yet." He looked up at her, pain visible in his eyes. "I need time," she said. "That's all." He nodded slowly. "I'll wait." Without another word, Lily walked away toward the hospital gate. Richard remained seated, staring at the ground, his heart heavier than it had ever been, even heavier than before he met her. He had told the truth, but sometimes truth doesn't heal right away. Sometimes it wounds first, before it mends. And now he had nothing to do but wait and hope that love would return. Days passed. Lily didn't return to the bakery. The townspeople noticed. The shop remained locked. Neighbors whispered that she was overwhelmed, that success had become too much for her, that the girl who once had nothing was now the owner of a bakery, but was nowhere to be found. Richard didn't explain. He just sat in his usual spot, quieter than ever. He didn't wear his disguise anymore, no more muttering, no more limp. Just a quiet man with tired eyes and too much regret in his heart. He hadn't seen Lily since the day at the hospital. Daniel came again. "She's not angry," Daniel said. "She's just trying to understand what's real. You need to give her space." Richard nodded. "I will. But don't disappear," Daniel added. "She might not admit it, but she checks. I've seen her walk past this street and glance your way when she thinks you're not looking." Hope flickered in Richard's chest. He waited. One morning, he walked to the bakery alone. The door was still locked, the windows dusty. He sat on the bench out front, staring at the sign above, "Lily's Home Bakes." The name had been freshly painted just before she vanished. He remembered the warmth of her voice, the softness of her hands, and the way she once said, "You remind me of my father." That memory stung. He knew he had disappointed her. That evening, he returned to the alley behind the church, the same place where he had spent his first night in Dalton. He lay down on the cold ground, staring at the sky. He had gone from a billionaire to a madman to something in between, and somehow the in-between was harder. 2 days later, Lily returned. Not to speak, not to explain, just to open the bakery. She arrived before sunrise, unlocked the door, and went in. Richard, sitting across the street, saw her but didn't move. He waited until she stepped out to sweep the front. She saw him. They locked eyes. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Lily turned away and went back inside. It hurt, but not like before. This time, it felt like a door had opened, just slightly. That afternoon, he went to the small flower shop beside the market. He bought a single yellow rose and placed it on the bench behind the bakery. No note, no message. The next morning, it was gone, and when Lily came out that day, she glanced at him again. This time her eyes softened. Still, she said nothing. Later that week, Richard received a letter. It was left beside his mat in the alley, folded neatly. He opened it. "I haven't forgiven you completely, but I'm trying. Come to the bakery tomorrow morning. I'll listen. Lily." His hands trembled as he read the words. He looked toward the sky, whispering a silent thank you. Love hadn't left. It had simply taken a few steps back. But now it was walking slowly toward him again. The next morning, Richard rose early. He didn't wear anything fancy, just a clean shirt and dark trousers. No cap, no disguise. He washed his face in the small stream near the edge of Dalton and combed his hair for the first time in weeks. He walked to the bakery as the sun touched the rooftops. The door was open. Lily stood inside, already dusting the counter and arranging trays of dough. She didn't look up when he entered, but she didn't send him away either. Richard stepped in slowly. "I came," he said softly. She nodded without turning. "I expected you would." He stood near the door, unsure if he should walk closer. She wiped her hands on her apron and finally faced him. "You look different," she said. "I am different," he replied. She studied him for a moment. "Why didn't you tell me the truth earlier?" "I was scared," he said. "Not of you. Of losing what we had. Of breaking the only real connection I've ever had." Lily leaned back against the counter. "You were already breaking it by hiding." He lowered his eyes. "I grew up watching people chase money," Lily continued. "Men who lied to get what they wanted. Women who acted like saints until a richer man passed by. I didn't want to be one of them," he said. She sighed. "You weren't, but you still tested me. You watched me like I was an experiment." He took a step closer. "I watched you because I didn't know how else to believe again. But you made me believe, Lily. You didn't just give me bread. You gave me dignity. You saw me when I was invisible." Lily's eyes welled with tears. "You hurt me. I know. I trusted you. I didn't deserve it then. But I want to earn it now." Silence filled the room. Then Lily reached beneath the counter and pulled out a photo frame. It was a picture of her father standing in front of a church with a quiet smile. "You reminded me of him," she whispered. "That's why I let you stay. He was gentle, silent and kind. He lost everything but never lost his heart." Richard's throat tightened. "I wish I had met him," she nodded. "He would have liked you, especially this version of you." He walked closer. "I don't want to pretend anymore. Not ever again." She looked up at him. "So what now, Richard?" He reached into his pocket and handed her a folded paper. It was the full ownership deed of the bakery, now legally hers, free of charge. Her hands trembled as she opened it. "I did this long before you found out who I was," he said. "Not because I pity you, because you deserve everything good in life." Tears rolled down her cheeks. She covered her mouth, overwhelmed. He stepped back. "If you never want to see me again, I'll leave Dalton. No questions. But if you believe what we had was real, I'll wait." Lily looked at the paper, then at him. "I don't want you to leave," she said quietly. His heart skipped. "But I also don't want promises," she added. "Not yet. Just truth. Just you," he nodded. "No more lies." They stood in silence. Then she walked past him toward the oven. "You can help me today," she said, picking up a rolling pin. "Flowers on the shelf," he smiled. He had been many things in his life, CEO, son, stranger, but this morning he was something new, a man beginning again. The bakery smelled like peace that morning. Warm bread, sugar and cinnamon filled the air. The small radio on the shelf played soft music, and for the first time in weeks, Richard didn't sit in a corner or pretend to be someone else. He stood beside Lily, wearing a borrowed apron and rolling dough. He wasn't perfect at it. His first rolls were lumpy and uneven, but Lily laughed softly, not in mockery, but in joy. "You're better than I expected," she teased. He shrugged. "I had a strict mother. She made us cook every Saturday." Lily smiled, then grew quiet. "How is she?" she asked. Richard looked up from the dough. "She passed away 3 years ago." "I'm sorry." "She would have liked you." There was a brief silence, and then Lily went to check on the oven. Richard used the quiet moment to look around. The walls of the bakery, once dull and tired, now seemed alive. Painted shelves, framed quotes, a small potted plant on the windowsill. He realized then it wasn't just Lily who had changed. The space had changed too, or maybe it had always been beautiful. He just hadn't noticed before. By midday, a few customers came in. Richard stayed at the back, not wanting to confuse or distract anyone. Lily served with her usual grace, greeting everyone warmly, laughing when a little girl called her "Bread Auntie." Later, when the shop grew quiet again, Lily brought him a seat. "Let's rest," she said. They sat side by side, sipping cold water from tin cups. "I didn't think we'd be here," she said. "Not like this." "Neither did I." She looked at him. "What will you do now? Go back to your world?" "I don't know," he said honestly. "That world feels far away, like someone else's life. But it's still yours. Maybe. But I want this too. This, you, this bakery, this version of me, the real one." Lily didn't speak right away. Then she asked, "Are you really ready to give up that old life?" "I'm not giving up anything," he replied. "I'm choosing something better." She smiled a little. As the day wound down, a light rain began to fall outside. The bakery closed early. They stood at the door together, watching droplets roll off the metal roof. "Do you remember the first thing I ever gave you?" Lily asked. He nodded. "Bread. Warm. From your apron. I didn't know I was giving it to a billionaire. And I didn't know I was meeting the woman who'd teach me how to love again." They stood in silence for a while. Then Lily said softly, "I still don't have all the answers, Richard. I'm still learning how to trust you again. I understand. But you're here. You stayed. That means something." He looked at her, his voice gentle. "It means everything." She turned to him. "Then we start from here. No rush. No labels, just real things." He nodded. "Real is all I want." That evening, as the rain continued to fall, Richard locked up the bakery beside her for the first time, and as they walked down the road together, no titles, no lies, no pressure, they walked not toward the end of a story, but toward a beginning. Weeks passed. Dalton Town had grown used to the sight of Richard and Lily walking together, not as strangers, not as madman and baker, but as quiet companions, learning how to trust again. Richard had stopped pretending. He was no longer the mysterious man with tangled hair. He helped Lily in the bakery each morning, took walks in the evenings, and sat beside her mother during hospital visits. Though few people knew his full story, the town now respected him, especially after word spread that he'd paid for the bakery and covered medical bills anonymously. But peace, as always, never stayed for long. One sunny afternoon, a black car rolled into town. It parked across the street from the bakery. The door opened, and a tall, elegant woman stepped out, heels clicking, perfume strong, face polished. Behind her, a man in a crisp grey suit followed. Lily was cleaning the glass when she froze. Richard, who was wiping down tables, noticed a change in her expression. "Are you all right?" he asked. She didn't respond, just nodded toward the window. He turned, then he froze too. Standing outside, Staring straight into the shop was Amanda, his ex-fiancée, the same woman who once said, "You're only valuable with your name." She stepped forward and opened the bakery door without knocking. "Richard," she said, as if she were greeting him in a boardroom. He stood tall, calm. "Amanda, you disappeared," she said, eyes narrowing. "The company thought you were dead. I thought you were dead." "You thought I was useless," he corrected gently. "You didn't look back," she smiled tightly. "And yet, here you are, baking bread." She looked around with quiet disgust, then let her eyes fall on Lily. "This is her?" she asked. "The girl you ran away for?" Lily stood straight. Her hands were flour-covered, her face bare, her dress simple. But she didn't flinch. Richard stepped between them. "This isn't your place, Amanda. Whatever you came for, say it and leave." Amanda raised a brow. "I came to tell you that your lawyer's been trying to reach you. Board meetings are falling apart. Investors are asking questions. And now that your little holiday's over, it's time to return." "I'm not going back." "You're serious?" He nodded. "Very." Amanda laughed. "To live here with her?" Richard looked back at Lily and smiled. "Yes, with her." Amanda rolled her eyes. "This is insane. You're wasting everything." "I've wasted enough already," he said. Amanda scoffed and stormed out. The man in the grey suit followed silent the entire time. When the door shut, Lily let out a shaky breath. Richard turned to her. "I'm sorry you had to see that." She didn't speak at first. Then she walked to the counter, picked up a clean cloth and handed it to him. "Wipe your hands," she said. "Dough is waiting." He took the cloth, stunned. "You're not angry?" he asked. "I'm still watching," she said softly, "still learning who you are." "But you're not walking away." She looked up at him, her voice quiet and firm. "No. Richard, I walked toward you for a reason. One visit from your past won't change that." And with that she went back to kneading. Richard stood there, cloth in hand, heart full. The past had knocked on the door, but the future had chosen to stay. Dalton had never felt more like home. The bakery was busier now. Word had spread far beyond the small town about the girl who rose from nothing and the mysterious man who baked bread beside her. Local newspapers called it Dalton's love story. People came from neighboring towns just to taste Lily's bread and catch a glimpse of Richard, the former billionaire who traded boardrooms for butter and flour. But not everyone saw it as romance. One rainy afternoon, as Richard and Lily closed the bakery early due to a storm, a white SUV parked quietly across the road. Richard noticed it, but said nothing. They went inside to count the day's earnings and clean up. Minutes later there was a knock. Lily dried her hands and opened the door. A tall man in his 60s stepped in, wearing a fine coat and holding an umbrella. He looked like power-dressed. "In politeness, good evening," he said. Richard froze. "Father," he said under his breath. Lily looked at him, confused. The man stepped forward. "Richard, we need to talk." They sat at the back of the bakery. Lily remained behind the counter, listening quietly as Richard's father spoke. "You disappeared for months. Left the company in chaos. Now I hear you've turned into a baker." Richard kept his voice calm. "I didn't disappear. I walked away. There's a difference." His father looked at Lily. "And this is why?" "No," Richard said. "She's not why. She's who helped me remember who I am." Mr. Miles sighed. "Richard, you're the only heir. We built that empire together. I didn't raise you to throw it away for feelings." "I'm not throwing anything away," Richard replied. "I'm building something better." His father stood, anger rising. "The board won't wait much longer. Investors are losing faith, but they'll come back if they see you're serious. Come back with me. You can bring her if you must." Lily stiffened. Not at the words, but at the tone, cold, dismissive, as if she were a suitcase Richard might choose to carry or leave. Richard stood too. "You're offering me my old life, but only if I agree to be someone I'm not anymore. I'm offering you your name back. I found something more valuable than my name." Richard said, turning toward Lily. "I found truth, peace, real love." His father scoffed. "You're lost." "No," Richard said firmly. "I was lost when I had everything but felt nothing." Silence fell. Mr. Miles looked at Lily one last time, then walked toward the door. Before leaving, he said, "You'll regret this when the world forgets you." But Richard smiled. "I'd rather be forgotten by the world than remembered as someone I never truly was." The door shut. Lily came closer, her voice low. "You gave up everything. Again." He turned to her. "Not everything. I still have you." She looked at him for a long time, then said softly, "You're not easy to love, Richard, but you're worth loving." He stepped forward, took her hand gently. "I don't need the world's approval, just your heart." And in the quiet bakery, beneath the sound of soft rain, she gave him a small nod. He was home, not in a mansion, but beside the woman who saw his soul. The night sky was clear, and the bakery lights were still glowing when Lily said, "Let's walk." Richard didn't hesitate. He slipped off his apron, wiped his hands, and followed her into the quiet streets of Dalton. They strolled past the church, past the stream where he once washed his face in secret, and toward the small hill that overlooked the town. They sat side by side on a bench under an old almond tree. "I used to come here," Lily said. "When things were hard, when I didn't know if we'd eat the next day, I'd sit here and just wait for something to change." He looked at her, his voice low. "And did it?" She turned to him with a faint smile. "One day a madman took the bread I offered and smiled like it was gold. That's when it started." Richard chuckled softly, then turned serious. "Do you regret it? Letting me into your life?" Lily didn't answer immediately. She picked up a stone and tossed it down the hill. "I regret the nights I cried because I didn't know who you were. But I don't regret finding out. Because truth always brings light, even if it hurts first." Richard nodded. "Then I want to give you something." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. Inside, it was a simple silver. A ring, no diamonds, no name, just a smooth circle shining in the moonlight. "I know it's not the usual way," he said, "and I know we're still healing, but I want to walk forward with you, not as a billionaire, not as a man who once pretended, but as Richard, yours, if you'll have me." Lily stared at the ring. Her hands trembled. "Can I think about it?" she asked softly. He nodded without hesitation. "Take all the time you need." The next day, everything changed. Just before noon, a fire broke out. It started in the back of the bakery, an electrical fault from a loose socket. Within minutes, smoke poured through the walls. Flames spread fast. The small kitchen oven caught fire. Customers screamed and rushed out. Richard, who had just stepped outside for flour, turned back and ran in. "Lily!" he shouted. She was inside, trapped near the back room, coughing heavily. He kicked down the door, grabbed her by the waist and pulled her through the thick smoke. Fire licked the edges of the ceiling. A burning beam crashed. Behind them, they tumbled out the front door, just as neighbors rushed forward with buckets of water. Someone called the fire service. Lily lay in Richard's arms, her breathing shallow. "You went in for me," she whispered, weak. "Always," he said, brushing her hair away from her face. That night, the bakery stood half-burned, the front, sign scorched. Richard stood beside her silently, hands in his pockets. Lily stared at what remained of her dream. "I can rebuild it," he said. She looked up at him. "No, we will rebuild it. Together." He smiled. "Does that mean—" She interrupted with a nod. "Yes, Richard. I'll marry you." He froze, then laughed softly, pulled her close and whispered, "Thank you. Not for the answer alone, but for choosing him again, even after the flames." Months passed. The bakery stood tall again, rebuilt with stronger bricks, larger windows, and a new sign that read, "Lily and Rich's Oven." It wasn't just a bakery anymore. It was a symbol of everything they had overcome: lies, tests, fire, and fear. Richard no longer stood in shadows. He was known now, not just as the former billionaire who pretended to be mad, but as the man who chose love over luxury, humility over pride. The townspeople, once skeptical, now greeted him with smiles. Children called him Uncle Rich. Elderly women said, "We always knew there was something special about you." And Lily, she was blooming. Her mother had fully recovered and now helped around the shop. Lily's eyes sparkled brighter, her steps were lighter. And though she still carried a quiet strength, there was a new softness in her voice, one that came from being truly loved and truly seen. Their wedding was simple. No cameras, no headlines, just a small gathering in the church beside the bakery. Lily wore a cream dress that floated in the wind. Richard wore a clean black suit. Daniel stood as Richard's best man, and Lily's mother walked her down the aisle with pride in her eyes when the priest asked, "Do you take this man?" Lily didn't hesitate. "I do. I take the man who sat in the dust to test the heart of the world. I take the one who chose kindness when he had power. I take the man who gave me nothing but honesty when he had everything to give." Tears filled Richard's eyes. He placed the same simple silver ring on her finger, the one he gave her that night under the almond tree. When they kissed, the bakery bell rang on its own, as if the building itself rejoiced. Afterward, they returned to the bakery, not for a fancy reception, but to serve warm bread and tea to every guest. "Love fed me when I had nothing," Richard said during his short speech. "So today, I feed you all with joy in my heart." Laughter filled the air. Even the old market women who once mocked him wiped their eyes as they clapped. That night, as the stars covered the sky, Lily and Richard sat outside their little home. Behind the bakery, hands entwined. "You could have had anything," she whispered. "Why choose this life?" He smiled, pressing her hand gently. "Because this life chose me. Because you chose me, not as a madman, not as a billionaire, but as a man, flawed, tested, but honest." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "And I'd choose you again, in any life." He looked up at the stars and whispered, "Then I've passed the only test that ever mattered." And there, under the soft night sky of Dalton Town, the man who once pretended to be mad finally found the only thing he was truly searching for: a love that needed no disguise, a home that asked for no riches, and a woman who saw him completely. The end. Hello, champions. I hope you enjoyed our stories. Please hit the like button, leave a comment below, and subscribe to our channel. Thanks.